I've been missing the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, I grew up watching Marvels just when I was a kid. It was whenever they were in their peak. And I just remember like constantly like 2-3 times a year going to the new Marvel movies. It was just so exciting. It was so fun. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about, particularly like growing up with that. You know, there'd be a sold out crowd. It was just a big deal every single time it released. It was like a TV show, but in movie form with like a new episode kind of every couple of months, but it was actually a movie. And I've been really looking back on it. It's just really, really interesting. And it's got me thinking, what is the ultimate Marvel movie? So we're going to discuss this in today's video. So the MCU ran from 2008 to current day. Obviously, it's still going. We're about to have Avengers Doomsday closing out the multiverse saga. But I would really say the peak of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the 2010s. Really kind of starting with Avengers in 2012 and just kind of getting more and more popular throughout, peaking in 2019 with Avengers Endgame. The Infinity War and Endgame double feature was just something you'll never forget if you were there in person. Because the characters were just so interesting. The characters would get developed not just within the films, but also, again, like it was a season of a television show throughout each movie. You know, Captain America in Endgame is very different than Captain America in the first Avengers, you know, and it was just very interesting concept in the way that they did it, and they would tell the stories over the course of 20 plus movies. You had to really know them, and each character got engraved into pop culture, right? And it's insane to imagine whenever you really like watch Infinity War or Endgame and you understand how many characters there are, that each of them was just had their own spot in pop culture that they had earned through, you know, just really cool moments and just really cool films in some cases, you know. And so I wanted to do an experiment about what the ultimate MCU movie would be. The movies I want to think of are something that you could show someone as a perfect example of what the MCU is, okay? So I'm not saying what's the best movie, okay? That's, I think, different, and also that's kind of subjective. I want to look more, I have criteria I'm going to lay out, so you can play along as well in the comments down below following the criteria. I always like to do that, but I also want to look again, what is just the ultimate Marvel movie? What is like a perfect example, a perfect case study, if you really just want to analyze Marvel and boil the entire franchise down kind of to a film, also something that stands on its own, what that would be. Again, ideally you would show this to someone and they don't know anything about it and they could understand the appeal of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So to determine what this is, we're going to break down the MCU into what it was and define those qualities within a movie. These are qualities I feel like encapsulated the MCU as a whole. Character building, storytelling, and story building. Okay, so it has to fit within the larger scheme. I'm really going to be thinking a lot of the Infinity Saga because the Multiverse Saga didn't really do a lot of story building, but there isn't a Multiverse Saga film within this video. Something major happens, right? Okay, plot twist. You know, again, these are things I think the MCU is known for. Its character building is known for its story building. It was known for these really cool fan moments in theaters, so there's got to be like a plot twist, something major happens. Humor. The films were really funny at times, and also the film needs to stand on its own. Like, you know, that was another appeal of the MCU is, you know, someone could just join in at any moment and kind of get into the MCU that way, but it also is something that is made deeper within full context of the story. Again, it needs to fit in within that place. But also just the filmmaking of it has to have really cool set pieces, really cool action scenes, the filmmaking of it all. Again, that's why I'm going to disqualify some films from this list that maybe would fit the criteria, but just simply because they're not very good. So we're going to look at a couple different contenders. I'm going to break this down into multiple different movies, and I want to kind of go over my top answers. Okay, so each one I'm going to discuss is my top answer, but the very last one is going to be what I have officially declared the definitive MCU movie. So my first contender is Guardians of the Galaxy, because tonally, it has the humor, it has the action set pieces, and it just fits into the MCU vibe so well. After this film was made, I don't think people understand truly how like changed the MCU was forever, especially when it leaned into like its comedy core. And honestly, just superhero film genres in general. I mean, James Gunn owns all of DC now. You got to know these characters, and I think that that's just another part of the beauty of the MCU is just like characters that weren't super well known at the time. You know, I mean, people knew Iron Man and Captain America, but they weren't like the biggest of the Marvel comics, you know? And so getting to know these kind of really crazy characters and falling in love with them because of the formula of the MCU, I think is really interesting. And they all became, again, major staples in pop culture, and they all became beloved. Something major happens, and it tied into the Infinity Saga very well. Even though, again, it was separate, it did tie into the Infinity Saga and the overall story. It did feel like you know, it was worth it to watch the film and to get deeper context, especially whenever you watch Infinity War and Endgame. You really see how important it was to us, just basic establishing things, but also things that were really helpful for understanding the story. But I'm going to have to say that this one doesn't make the cut, solely because, and here are the reasons why, it exists too much outside of the MCU, okay? It just doesn't, you can't watch this and show somebody and be like, this is a typical MCU film, whenever it just exists too much outside of the world. You know, you're really not getting to know some of the most iconic characters in the MCU. You're not really getting like S.H.I.E.L.D. and just kind of what's going on Earth and everything. And so it's just so separated that I kind of have to take it out. And you can swap this out, I think, for Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, or 3, but I'm just going to kind of count the first one because I think that that was the most influential potential of the trilogy. And so that's just my opinion on the first reason. The second is that it doesn't have that episode of a TV show feel to it. It just doesn't fit like super well into the overall of the storyline. And I think this is a case where like what actually makes it so good actually is a detriment to it on this list with these particular qualifications, because it just doesn't have that episode of a TV show feel to it. It doesn't feel like it, you know, you can drop into the world and feel like you understand everything and the appeal about Marvel. It's very individualistic, and I think that that's great, but I think that, like I said, I think it just kind of like devalues it a little bit whenever it comes to the list of this. This is another reason that episode of a TV show feel why I'm not including films like Ant-Man, Captain Marvel, and Black Panther, because while I absolutely loved those movies, those films feel so individual, and they don't really come into the canon until Infinity War and Endgame. You know, that's whenever you see the payoff of the time you've been spending. You know, that's part of the MCU, but like I said, in this particular list, I'm wanting to incorporate films that both have the payoff and a setup, you know, a little bit of both. The next one I have, which is the only film that's a part of the multiverse saga, is Spider-Man No Way Home. Okay, because I think that this film, in my opinion, was one of the best films of No Way Home. Tonally, it's just a very Marvel movie. It just really, really fits. I think people love Spider-Man at this point. He was very well established, very popular character. You have Doctor Strange in the film, Wong, you know, so there's some really established characters that you love. There was lots of character developments within this film. You know, again, it kind of felt like an episode of a TV show of the multiverse saga, which was just kind of a terrible season if you want to, you know, use the guidelines that I'm using. And it was story building. You know, it was one of the only films I think that did story building of the multiverse saga well. I mean, I think Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness did as well, but I think that, you know, kind of destroyed Wanda's character, so I don't really count that in this list. And also something major happens with the other Spider-Man showing up. And I think that, you know, that audience moment, the audience reaction, again, is very Marvel and very much what people think about when they think about Marvel, and that's very nice and appealing. But I'm actually going to put that as a reason why it doesn't work a little bit, because it doesn't exist on its own very well. Whereas like these other films, I think, exist on their own too much. This one, you really kind of, it really is kind of necessary for you to have the knowledge of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Again, not a bad thing about this movie. This isn't a list of good movies. This is a list of what I think the ultimate movie is. And so I'm going to have to fault it for that. I also, like, I loved it, and I still to this day will defend cameos. I don't feel like they were cash grabs. They felt authentic because both of those storylines never got a complete ending. So actually be able to give them an ending kind of felt authentic to me, and I really, really liked that. But it doesn't exist too well outside of the context of what you're watching. And so I love that film. I love both of those characters, and I love that, but I just don't think that it's necessarily something that I would qualify for this list because of those reasons. The next film is actually maybe my favorite MCU movie, and that's Avengers Endgame. On paper, Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War would be the ultimate Marvel movies. So let's talk about Avengers Endgame. Okay, the character building is there. You're meeting the first 6 Avengers, right? Like, you're meeting the main characters of the story that we've been following since the very beginning. You're getting that MCU tone. Although I would even say this one's probably a little bit more serious, but that's okay. It has some really funny moments in this film. Major set pieces, just the visuals of this film, and like this cool battle scenes and seeing everybody together is great. It definitely has its memorable moments. I'll always remember when he said Avengers Assemble in the theater. I was like so hyped up, honestly. I was like, I've never been that hyped in a movie before. It was amazing. I remember walking by the Dolby Theater whenever I was going to see Avengers Endgame, and I had to see it at 11 because I was going to get tickets for 7 o'clock Thursday night showing. And whenever I walked past the theater, I heard the Avengers theme playing from the showing that was currently happening right now, and I was just so hyped. Like, the memories and the cool elements that Avengers Endgame has will always live on forever. And I think that makes it just a great cinematic experience. And it's just a really amazing moment, and I think you can watch videos of people watching Avengers Endgame and really understand some of the Marvel hype a little bit that way. But I say all this to say that it doesn't really exist on its own very well as well. Again, kind of a similar reasons for Spider-Man No Way Home. It's a finale. It's a great finale, but it's a finale. I wouldn't necessarily say it's just the ultimate Marvel movie. I would say even Infinity War exists on its own a little bit more. Like, I think that it's a really good finale. It's a really good film, but again, you have to have that context. You know, you have to know what Avengers Assemble means, and like, you have to have been waiting for that for a long time, waiting for the Avengers theme to play, knowing are they going to come back or not. It's absolutely necessary to see Infinity War for this film, and so I'm gonna have to say it's a no. So the next film, which again, on paper, I think a lot of people will agree and say that Avengers Infinity War is the best MCU movie. Let's talk about it. Okay, this isn't the answer yet, but it has the characters in the film. It has all of the characters in the film. They all get plenty of time. The action sequences are amazing. It's just so well paced, and it's a really fun movie to watch. I think you look at the Avengers Endgame experience and you understand the Marvel hype, and then you look at Infinity War the movie and you understand why that hype started. I think it's just a really fun movie. It has cool plot twists. You know, the ending of the film, I'll always always remember watching the ending of this film too, you know, where everyone was fading away and disappearing. Just a really cool moment to watch. I mean, just an iconic moment for everyone to discuss the next day. I remember that as well. I think it's one of, if not the best MCU film, objectively, in terms of a quality standpoint. Like I said, the end of this movie will be remembered forever. Just Thor losing, and then all of them not only losing, but then a lot of them dying, was just insane. It's just a really, really good, fun MCU movie, and I think it really encapsulates a lot of what the MCU is and its appeal. But the reason it doesn't win for the top spot of what is the ultimate Marvel movie is because the story is centered on Thanos. The main character is Thanos. And again, what makes this film so cool and fun doesn't necessarily make the best MCU movie, actually, because we have been waiting a full decade at that point to see Thanos and to get to know Thanos. And this whole movie is through Thanos' perspective. He's absolutely the main character of this movie, and that's what makes it so fun. But I can't necessarily say that it's the ultimate Marvel movie because, again, you're not knowing those main characters. You have to establish those main characters and know that conflict. And you also have to have that buildup of knowing who Thanos is and hearing about the things Thanos has done and establishing his presence within the universe to make him the big bad that he actually is. And so I'm gonna have to say that this isn't. Because again, I love Thanos, and I think making the first story through the villain's perspective and also the villains losing at the end are great, amazing twists, but only work when you have the context of what the previous films have been and have done. So before we get to the answer, I'm gonna ask you to please subscribe so I can get to 500 subscribers by the end of May. That's my goal. I make these videos every single week. I have a blast making them, and I'm really growing on the channel, and a subscriber would really mean a lot if you could do it. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, though. Let's get to the answer. The answer, what I have decided, is the ultimate Marvel movie is Captain America Civil War. Okay, it has great character development, and it's like an episode of a TV show. When you watch that, you're just like transported into the storyline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only with kind of what's going on the outside of the world, but also the conflict. I also think you can drop into this film not knowing anything about the world and understand the conflict, and I think understanding the conflict and understanding each character's position on the conflict, it makes it introductory for someone who may not have otherwise known anything about the MCU. You're understanding these characters through how they react to this conflict. But if you've already had the characters established, it makes sense, and it's almost a deeper exploration of how they interact with this conflict. You know, knowing that Tony Stark is against the Sokovia Accords establishes a lot about his character. When you see Avengers Age of Ultron and you understand how he got to that, that makes it more interesting. So I think it serves as both a really great episode of the MCU, but also a really good individual storyline. It has major twists, not only with the reveal that Bucky killed Iron Man's father, but also just a lot of really cool action scenes in the Baron Zemo situation. And also it has really cool setups that ended up actually being paid off. You know, this is the first introduction of Spider-Man and Black Panther, who of course became major players. So it's, you know, an introductory while you're, you know, following the story of the characters that you've loved for so long. It's introductory into the world of characters that ended up becoming very well established, and it being their first appearance in on this action. And so it sets up a future of the MCU very well, and so you get a sense of that build up and what it was like, and going, okay, we're establishing a new character, you know. And also the conflict of Civil War very much plays into Infinity War, so it very much is useful to the whole overall storyline, you know, having these characters divided. It also just, it has really great action scenes, just like as a Marvel movie. I think it has really great action scenes. I use action scenes from this film all the time on my YouTube channel because they're great. They're just fun to watch. They're really cool, and the humor in this is really fun as well. So what do you think is the ultimate Marvel movie? Use the qualifications that I have established to determine what you think is the ultimate Marvel movie down below. I had a really fun time making this. Like I said, please consider liking and subscribing and commenting on this video so we can get to 500 subscribers. You're all amazing, and peace out.